The void of space stretched endlessly, a black abyss dotted with cold, distant stars. Among them, hidden behind the cratered surface of a dead moon, humanity's first stealth fleet drifted in absolute silence. Their engines were powered down, their hulls coated in adaptive camouflage, making them nearly invisible to the naked eye. The fleet consisted of 6 ships, 4 fast-moving assault frigates, a command cruiser, and 1 experimental stealth corvette designed for infiltration. Inside the command cruiser HSV Valor, Captain Elias Voss stood at the center of the dimly lit bridge, his fingers pressed together as he studied the holographic projections before him. Every officer and crew member moved with quiet precision, their voices hushed as if afraid that even the faintest sound might betray their presence to the enemy lurking beyond the moon's shadow. A soft chime broke the silence. "Incoming transmission, sir," said Lieutenant Ava Sterling, her voice steady but tight. "It's encrypted, military grade. It's from Outpost Theta." Voss nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and the image of a terrified human officer appeared. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with blood and sweat. Behind him, the dim red emergency lights cast eerie shadows over a metallic corridor littered with debris. Explosions shook the feed, and distant screams echoed through the transmission. "This is *** Commander Work of Outpost Theta. We are under attack. Repeat, Vazir forces have breached our defenses. Civilian evacuation is incomplete. We need." The screen distorted. A sharp mechanical voice cut in, replacing the human distress call with something cold, calculated. "Primitive species. Resistance is illogical. Surrender is unnecessary. Termination is efficient." Then, static. A chilling silence filled the bridge. Voss exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. The Vazir Empire, a ruthless, machine-dominated alien faction that viewed organic life as nothing more than an inconvenience to be erased. Humanity had avoided open war with them, until now. Sterling's voice was quiet. "Outpost Theta is only 3 hours away from Avalon Colony." That hit like a punch to the gut. Avalon Colony housed over 400,000 civilians. Men, women, children. If the Vazir dreadnoughts reached them, there wouldn't be survivors. The weight of the moment settled on the crew. They were a stealth operation force, not a full-scale battle fleet. The nearest human warships were days away. By the time reinforcements arrived, Avalon would be nothing but ash and silence. Voss straightened. "What's the status of enemy ships in the system?" Sterling's fingers danced over her console. A holographic map expanded, showing red markers, enemy ships, moving in a tight formation near the outpost. But that wasn't the worst part. A massive blip warped into existence on the outer edge of the star system. A Vazir dreadnought. Voss's stomach turned to ice. The Leviathan-class dreadnought was a planet killer. If it reached Avalon, there was no stopping it. One shot from its primary weapon could glass an entire city in seconds. Sterling whispered the words no one wanted to say. "They're bringing an extermination fleet." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was louder than any explosion. Then Voss moved. "Get me a secure line to the strike team." A moment later, a new hologram appeared. Lieutenant Commander Orion Kane, leader of the Shadow Vipers, humanity's most elite special forces unit. Kane stood inside the cramped deployment bay of the stealth corvette. He was already in full black combat armor, his helmet tucked under one arm, his scared face unreadable. "Sir," Kane said, his voice low and steady, "I assume this isn't a social call." "We have a situation," Voss said. "The Vazir fleet is moving to exterminate Avalon Colony. We can't engage them directly. Our only option is to infiltrate their dreadnought and disable it from within." Kane raised an eyebrow. "A dreadnought infiltration? That's a suicide mission." "Maybe." Voss met his gaze. "But it's the only chance we have." Kane's expression didn't change. "What's the timeline?" "They'll reach Avalon in 3 hours. You need to board that dreadnought before they start their attack. Kane sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. Well, he muttered, I always did want to see the inside of one of those things. He looked past the camera, toward his team, 12 of the deadliest soldiers humanity had to offer, all armed to the teeth. Shadow Vipers, suit up. We've got a ship to board. Voss turned to his bridge crew. Helm, prepare to move into position. The stealth corvette detached from the fleet, its engines humming softly as it maneuvered into the black void. The rest of the human ships remained cloaked, watching, waiting. As the corvette slipped into the darkness, the bridge crew felt the weight of the mission settle over them. If this failed, Avalon would burn. If they were caught, there would be no rescue. Voss closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, his resolve hardening. This was it, humanity's first step into galactic warfare. And there was no turning back. The stealth corvette, HSV Phantom, drifted through the void of space, its hull blending seamlessly into the blackness. No running lights, no active signals, just silent death creeping toward its target. Inside, the Shadow Vipers made their final preparations. The atmosphere in the deployment bay was tense, filled with the quiet hum of weapons being checked, armor plates locking into place, and the low murmurs of final strategy adjustments. Lieutenant Commander Orion Kane stood near the airlock, his helmet in his hands, eyes scanning the mission briefing one last time. He had been on dozens of high-risk missions before, but this was different. They weren't hitting a pirate outpost or a rogue faction's command center. They were about to infiltrate a Vazir Leviathan-class dreadnought, a ship so massive it could wipe out entire planets with a single bombardment. 2 minutes until insertion, came the voice of Captain Voss over the comms. Once inside, you'll have a narrow window before they realize something is wrong. Get to the core, plant the disruptor, and get the hell out. Kane didn't respond immediately. He turned his head slightly, looking at his team. 12 soldiers, 12 of the best. Each one had trained for years, had survived battles that should have killed them, had given up everything for missions just like this. And yet, even among them, he could see it, the unspoken weight of reality. This wasn't a mission they were expected to come back from. He exhaled slowly, placing his helmet on his head, the visor sealing with a soft hiss. All right, Vipers, he said, his voice calm. This is the one they'll write history books about. We either stop that dreadnought, or we watch 400,000 people die. We clear. A chorus of acknowledgments came through the squad's comms. No hesitation, no fear in their voices, just focus. The corvette slowed to a near stop, aligning itself with the underside of the dreadnought. The enemy ship was a monstrous structure, its metallic surface covered in pulse cannons, sensor arrays, and thick layers of armor plating. It had no reason to scan for infiltrators. No organic force had ever dared to board a Vazir dreadnought before. That was about to change. The Phantom's docking clamps engaged, locking onto a maintenance hatch. A soft vibration ran through the deck as the corvette's hull synchronized with the alien metal. The boarding tunnel extended, and the airlock's inner door slid open with a hiss. Kane stepped forward, gripping his rifle. Move. One by one, the Shadow Vipers slipped into the dark corridor of the dreadnought, their suits automatically adjusting to dampen sound. The air was stale, cold, entirely devoid of life. The Vazir were machines, and unlike humans, they didn't need breathable air, temperature control, or even corridors designed for comfort. The walls were lined with glowing conduits, pulsing in strange, unreadable patterns, casting eerie blue light along the path. Kane checked his HUD. They had 20 minutes before the enemy's internal systems detected their presence. Stay tight, stay quiet, he whispered over comms. They moved in a tight formation, sweeping each corner with precision, navigating through the ship's alien architecture. The design was inhuman. No clear doors, just shifting panels that retracted and expanded, leading to strange, spiraling corridors. It was like walking inside something alive. As they reached a junction, Sergeant Bonner held up a fist, signaling a halt. He turned his head slightly, listening through his helmet's sensors. Then he whispered, "Movement ahead." Kane activated his thermal visor. A few meters down, a pair of sentry drones hovered, their sleek metallic frames pulsing with red light, scanning the area with precision. These machines weren't built for combat. They were security enforcers, designed to detect and report intrusions. If one of them sent an alert, the entire ship would be on high alert in seconds. Kane gave a small hand signal. Sergeant Vega and Private Malik raised their suppressed railguns. Two quick whispers of energy discharge, and the drones collapsed to the floor, their power cores flickering before going dark. They moved forward. Minutes passed. They navigated through towering data archives, long corridors where the walls pulsed with alien script, and massive reactor chambers where energy conduits ran like veins through the ship's core. It felt less like a vessel and more like a living entity, one that knew it was being invaded. Then the first sign of trouble. As they entered a large cylindrical chamber, the floor beneath them shifted. A panel retracted, revealing a scanning node. A thin, mechanical eye flickered to life, sweeping the room in an instant. The ship screamed, not in sound, but in alerts flashing through its systems. The dim blue lights turned deep crimson, alarms blaring in a pulsating, digital rhythm. "Shit," Vega cursed. "We're exposed." Kane snapped his rifle up. "Move, move, move." From the walls and ceiling, hidden compartments slid open, releasing Vazir combat drones. Unlike the sentries from before, these were designed for war. Sleek, spider-like machines with razor-sharp appendages and plasma rifles fused into their arms. The first shots rang out. Sergeant Bonner went down immediately, a plasma bolt piercing his chest plate. He fell with a grunt, clutching at the smoking wound. Private Diaz grabbed him, dragging him back, but the drones descended fast. Kane and the others returned fire, their railguns punching through the metallic bodies, sending sparks and molten metal flying. Explosions of blue energy filled the chamber as the drones collapsed, but more were coming. Bonner's hit bad. Diaz shouted. Bonner gritted his teeth, his breath coming in sharp gasps. "I'll slow you down. Leave me." "No one gets left behind," Kane snapped. But he knew. They didn't have time. The Vazir reinforcements would be here in seconds. Bonner grabbed a detonator from his belt, forcing it into Kane's hand. His voice was steady, even as blood filled his mouth. "Go. Finish the mission." Kane hesitated for only a second. Then he nodded. Bonner pushed himself up, using the last of his strength to stagger toward the corridor where more drones were pouring in. He raised his rifle, grinning despite the pain. "Come get me, you metal bastards." Then he pressed the detonator. A violent explosion erupted, the blast wave engulfing the drones in fire. The walls shook, and for a brief moment, everything was chaos. When the smoke cleared, Bonner was gone. Kane clenched his fists but forced himself to move. No time to mourn. Not yet. They ran. With the alarms blaring and reinforcements closing in, they had only one option left. They had to reach the ship's core before it was too late. The ship was awake now. Alarms howled through the corridors, a digital scream pulsing through the metal walls. The once sterile blue lighting had turned a deep, menacing red, flashing in rhythmic pulses. The Vazir dreadnought had fully activated its security protocols, and now the entire ship was hunting them. Kane's boots pounded against the floor as he sprinted ahead, his rifle clutched tight in his hands. Bonner was gone. There was no time to process it, no time to let the weight settle. The only thing keeping them alive now was speed. "Move," he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The remaining 11 Shadow Vipers pushed forward, their training kicking in, moving like a single coordinated unit. They weaved through the alien corridors, their weapons sweeping the environment, fingers ready on the triggers. The ship was a maze of twisting metal pathways, its walls shifting and changing as if the vessel itself was reacting to them. "Where's the core?" Vega shouted over the comms, checking her HUD. 70 meters ahead, Malik responded. "Past the next junction." Before he could finish, a section of the floor collapsed, and from beneath the metal plating, HFY war drones surged upward. They didn't hesitate. The first drone, a sleek, insect-like machine with a shimmering plasma blade, lunged at Kane. He barely had time to react. He twisted, slamming his forearm against its attack, redirecting the blade away from his chest. The heat from the plasma burned through part of his armor, but he didn't stop. He rammed the barrel of his rifle into the drone's head and fired point-blank. The machine jerked violently, sparks flying from its skull before it collapsed in a heap of molten metal. All hell broke loose. The hallway exploded with gunfire, blue tracer rounds cutting through the air, tearing into the mechanical enemies. The HFY drones moved unnaturally fast, their multi-jointed limbs snapping forward with terrifying precision. Some hovered, some crawled along the walls, but all of them attacked with one goal: eradicate the intruders. Private Diaz went down first. A drone dropped from the ceiling, impaling him through the chest with a plasma spike before anyone could react. His scream was short-lived, his body going limp as his visor cracked and darkened. "Diaz!" Malik roared, his voice filled with fury. He spun, unleashing a full burst from his rifle, shredding the drone apart. But it was too late. Diaz was gone. No time. Kane shouted. Every second wasted meant another death. "We push forward. Move." They fell into a brutal rhythm. Move, shoot, cover, reload. Every shot had to count. Every movement had to be precise. The HFY weren't just stronger. They were faster, smarter, relentless. For every drone they cut down, another two seemed to replace it. Vega threw a pulse grenade, the explosion sending a dozen drones flying in pieces, their shattered remains clattering against the walls. "Go, go, go," she yelled. They sprinted through the wreckage, vaulting over burning metal, pressing deeper into the dreadnought. The ship itself was adapting, metal walls shifting to create obstacles, corridors restructuring to slow them down. It was like the vessel was trying to trap them in a maze. "We're almost there," Malik shouted, pointing at a massive blast door ahead. "That's the entrance to the core." But then the floor trembled. A deep mechanical hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones. The walls peeled open, revealing something far worse than drones. A HFY executioner unit. It stepped forward, its towering skeletal frame bristling with plasma weaponry. Unlike the smaller drones, this was something else. Heavily armored, nearly indestructible. Its head, a featureless metal mask, turned toward them, scanning each soldier. Organic threats detected. Its voice was deep, emotionless. Annihilation protocol engage. Then it fired. A searing plasma blast tore through the air, hitting Private Holt dead center. His body vaporized instantly, leaving nothing but scorched metal where he had been standing. Malik and Vega dove for cover, barely avoiding the next blast. "We can't fight this thing," Vega shouted. Kane gritted his teeth. "We don't have to." He spotted something. Above the executioner, near the ceiling, an exposed coolant pipe ran along the length of the corridor. If they ruptured it, the extreme cold might slow the machine down. "Malik, hit that pipe," Kane ordered. Malik reacted instantly, firing a high-impact round into the pipe. The metal shattered, and within seconds, supercooled vapor burst into the air, engulfing the executioner. Its movements slowed, the freezing temperature disrupting its circuits, making its limbs sluggish. "Now, focus fire," Kane roared. The team unleashed everything they had, targeting the weakened joints and exposed circuitry. The executioner staggered, sparks and molten metal pouring from its cracks. Vega pulled a detonation charge from her belt, sprinting forward without hesitation. "Vega, WAIT," Kane shouted, but she was already moving. She jumped onto the executioner, planting the explosive directly onto its back. The machine reacted instantly, swinging a blade-like limb toward her. She had no time to escape. She just smiled through her visor. "For Diaz, you metal bastard." Then she detonated the charge. A massive fireball erupted, consuming both Vega and the executioner in a blinding explosion. The force of the blast knocked everyone off their feet. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left of either of them. Kane pushed himself up, rage and grief tightening his chest. 3 soldiers gone, and the mission wasn't over yet. The blast door to the core was still sealed. "Malik," Kane said, his voice low but firm, "get that door open." Malik's hands trembled slightly as he worked. He had just lost his best friend, but he didn't let it stop him. A few tense seconds later, the door slid open. Beyond it lay the core of the dreadnought, a vast circular chamber with a glowing sphere of pulsing energy at its center. This was it, the heart of the beast. Kane exhaled sharply. They had made it this far. Now they had to finish it. The core chamber was vast, an enormous circular space bathed in an eerie blue glow. The pulsing energy sphere at the center floated above a metallic platform, humming with alien power. Streams of data flickered across its surface, shifting like liquid light. This was the heart of the Vazir dreadnought, the brain controlling the entire ship. Kane and the remaining Shadow Vipers stood at the threshold, their weapons raised. 3 of their own were dead. The cost of reaching this place had been high, but there was no turning back now. Malik's fingers danced over his wrist console, scanning the core's structure. "This thing is running a quantum-grade firewall. We can't just hack it. We need a direct override." Kane took a step forward, eyes locked on the pulsing energy sphere. "Then we take it out manually." Before anyone could respond, the chamber rumbled violently. The ship knew they were here. The core's light flashed brighter, and a deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Intruders detected. Hostile organic presence. Extermination sequence initiated." The walls peeled open. Vazir sentinels emerged, their elongated metal bodies unfolding as they descended from the ceiling. These were not ordinary war drones. These were the ship's elite defenders. Their sleek black armor pulsed with energy fields, their arms shifting into lethal plasma weaponry. "Here they come," Malik shouted, raising his rifle. The first sentinel fired, a stream of plasma lancing through the air. Kane barely dodged, feeling the heat scorch past his helmet. The room erupted into chaos. The Vipers scattered, returning fire. Bullets and energy blasts clashed mid-air, the chamber flashing with bursts of light. One of the sentinels lunged at Diaz's empty position, its blade slicing through the air where he would have stood. It didn't know he was already dead. Kane gritted his teeth. They had to end this now. "Malik, can we overload the core?" Malik took cover behind a console, rapidly scanning the interface. "Maybe. If I can breach the coolant systems, I can force a meltdown." "Do it," Kane ordered. But the Vazir weren't going to let them. A sentinel charged at Malik, its plasma spear aimed for his chest. Kane reacted without thinking, diving forward, tackling Malik out of the way just as the weapon impaled the console where he had been standing. Sparks exploded in all directions. Malik scrambled up. That was close. The sentinel whirled, raising its cannon. Vega would have made a joke here. She would have laughed in the face of death. But she was gone now. Kane wasn't laughing. He grabbed a fallen pulse grenade, yanked the pin, and shoved it into the sentinel's exposed chest cavity. "Eat this." He kicked the machine backward as the grenade detonated. The explosion sent the sentinel flying into another, both of them collapsing in a heap of molten metal. Malik didn't waste the opening. He rushed to the core's control panel, fingers moving furiously. "I got access. Just need a few seconds." They didn't have seconds. Two more sentinels dropped from above, their weapons glowing hot. One of them fired a rapid plasma barrage, forcing Kane and the others to dive for cover. Private Lynn wasn't fast enough. The plasma blasts ripped through her armor, her body jerking violently before she collapsed, unmoving. Kane clenched his fists. That was foregone. No time to grieve, no time to process. He popped up from cover, emptying an entire magazine into the closest sentinel's head, his rounds piercing its energy field and shattering its skull. The machine collapsed, but the second sentinel was already moving, its energy blades slashing toward him. Then a sniper shot pierced through its head, sending it crashing to the floor. Kane turned to see Sergeant Bishop, rifle smoking. "You good?" "Still breathing," Kane muttered. He glanced at Malik. "Talk to me." "Almost there." Malik's fingers blurred over the console. "I just need." A final alarm blared, the core's light shifting to deep crimson. System overridttt. Core instability imminent. Malik grinned. "We did it." The entire ship shuddered violently, the walls trembling as if the vessel itself was in pain. The core's glow fluctuated wildly, sparks of uncontrolled energy arcing through the chamber. Kane's radio crackled. Command was calling. "Shadow Vipers, do you copy? We're detecting a massive power surge in the enemy ship. What's your status?" Kane pressed his comm. "Core's going critical. We need an extraction, now." "Roger that. Evac team inbound. Get to the hangar. You've got 5 minutes before that ship turns into a star." Kane turned to his team. "You heard them. Move." Malik disconnected from the console, and the remaining 7 Shadow Vipers sprinted for the exit. The corridors were already tearing apart, structural failures ripping through the dreadnought. They ran through collapsing hallways, dodging falling debris, leaping over cracks in the floor as explosions erupted behind them. The ship was dying. "Hangars up ahead," Bishop called out. The blast doors groaned open, revealing their stolen dropship. The pilot was already inside, engines roaring to life. One final obstacle stood in their way. A Vazir warlord. It was twice the size of a human, its chitinous exoskeleton reinforced with ablative plating. Its glowing yellow eyes locked onto them as it stepped forward, its voice a deep mechanical growl. "Fools, you think this is victory? The Vazir Empire is eternal." It raised a massive plasma blade, the weapon crackling with power. Kane didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, standing alone against the towering monster. "This is for Bonner," he said. The warlord swung. Kane dodged left, firing into its exposed side. The rounds ricocheted off its armor, barely making a dent. The warlord countered with a backhand strike, sending Kane crashing into a wall. Pain exploded through his ribs. He coughed, blood staining his visor. But he pushed himself up. The warlord raised its blade for the final strike. Then Bishop and Malik opened fire together, targeting the joints. The warlord staggered, momentarily exposed. Kane saw his chance. With one final burst of strength, he lunged forward, grabbing a fallen enemy plasma grenade and jamming it straight into the warlord's throat cavity. The machine jerked, its glowing eyes flickering in sudden realization. "Burn in hell," Kane whispered. Then he kicked it backward, just as the grenade detonated. The warlord exploded from the inside out, its body disintegrating into molten slag. "Get on the ship," Kane yelled. The team rushed aboard, the ramp sealing behind them as the drop ship blasted away from the burning dreadnought. Through the cockpit window, they watched as the Vazir warship ruptured from within, its core finally collapsing. The dreadnought imploded, sending a massive shockwave across space. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the radio crackled again. Mission accomplished. Kane exhaled, slumping back against the wall. They had lost too many. The war wasn't over. But today, humanity had won. The dropship moved through the debris field, its engines humming softly in the vast silence of space. The Vazir dreadnought was gone, reduced to nothing but scattered fragments of twisted metal and flickering embers. What had once been a symbol of alien superiority was now a drifting graveyard, the remains of the enemy burning against the backdrop of distant stars. Inside the ship, no one spoke. The weight of what had happened, of what they had lost, hung in the air like an unseen force pressing down on them. Kane sat near the bulkhead, helmet resting beside him. Dried blood streaked his face. His body ached from the battle, but the pain was nothing compared to the hollow feeling in his chest. 4 Vipers were gone: Vega, Lynn, Diaz, and Bonner. Malik sat across from him, staring at nothing, his fingers absently tracing a deep scratch on his forearm armor. Bishop was cleaning his rifle, not because he needed to, but because it gave his hand something to do. The others were quiet, lost in their own thoughts. The ship's radio crackled to life. "Shadow Vipers, this is command. Confirming destruction of the enemy vessel. Casualty report." Kane closed his eyes for a moment, then pressed his comm. His voice was hoarse. "For Kaya." A pause. Then, command's voice came back, softer this time. "Acknowledged. Evac team standing by. Get home safe." Kane clenched his jaw. Safe. There was no safety in war. No one ever truly went home. The people they lost stayed with them. The dropship finally reached the main fleet, gliding into the massive hangar bay of the HFY Revenant, one of humanity's last remaining warships. As soon as the ship landed, the ramp hissed open, revealing a swarm of medics, engineers, and officers waiting outside. Kane stood, his body protesting, but he ignored it. They had work to do. A medic approached, scanning him with a handheld device. "Sir, you're injured." "I'm fine." He stepped past her. The crew unloaded their fallen comrades with quiet efficiency. 4 body bags were carried off the ship, each one draped in the Earth Federation flag. Soldiers lined the hangar, standing at attention as the fallen were taken away. No words were spoken. Respect was given in silence. Kane's fists clenched. They had won, but at what cost? Admiral Sorensen approached, his uniform pristine, but his expression grim. "You did good out there, Kane. The Vazir just lost one of their most powerful ships. You struck a blow they won't forget." Kane's eyes darkened. "They won't forget, but neither will we." He glanced toward the retreating body bags. The Admiral exhaled, nodding. "War takes its toll, but what you and your team did today saved millions of lives." Kane wanted to believe that. He wanted to think that Bonner's death, that Vega's jokes, that Diaz's sacrifices had meant something. But the war wasn't over. And the Vazir weren't done yet. The crew was given a few hours to recover, but rest didn't come easy. Some went to the mess hall, some to the bunks. Kane found himself in the observation deck, staring out at the wreckage left behind. The shattered remains of the enemy ship drifted among the stars, flickering pieces of light swallowed by the endless void. Malik joined him, standing silently for a long moment. "They'd be proud, you know." Kane exhaled. Would they? They believed in the mission. They knew the risks. Malik glanced at Kane. "And they'd want us to keep fighting." Kane didn't answer, but deep down, he knew Malik was right. A chime echoed through the ship. "All senior officers report to the war room." Immediate briefing. Kane turned away from the window. The fight wasn't over. It never was. The war room of the HFY Revenant was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the brightly illuminated holographic display dominating the center of the chamber. A massive projection of the galaxy flickered in front of them, pulsating red markers indicating active conflict zones. The Vazir Empire's reach extended like a suffocating shadow, their influence spanning across dozens of occupied systems. Kane stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, eyes scanning the tactical map. The Shadow Vipers had barely returned from their mission, yet here they were, gearing up for the next fight. There was no time to rest. Admiral Sorensen stood at the head of the room, flanked by senior officers and intelligence analysts. His voice was steady, but there was a new weight behind it. "What you accomplished today was nothing short of extraordinary," he began. "The destruction of the Vazir dreadnought has sent shockwaves through their empire. This is the first time in recorded history that a human force has managed to cripple one of their major warships." Kane felt the weight of those words settle over him. They had won a battle, but the war had only just begun. Sorensen continued, his expression hardening. "We've intercepted transmissions from the Vazir fleet. They're furious, and they're responding." A section of the galactic map flashed red, expanding outward like an infection. Vazir reinforcements were already on the move. "Our scouts have confirmed the arrival of 3 additional dreadnoughts, along with several escort fleets. They aren't just retaliating." Sorensen's gaze swept over the room. "They're preparing for total war." The air grew thick with tension. No one spoke, but the unspoken truth hung between them. The Vazir had underestimated humanity, but now they were taking them seriously. Kane tightened his fists. "What's the plan?" Sorensen motioned toward the display, zooming in on a series of contested systems near the human Vazir front lines. "Command believes we can't afford to fight defensively anymore. If we stay on the back foot, they'll grind us into extinction. We have to strike first." The display shifted again, highlighting a Vazir stronghold, a massive industrial world, one of their primary shipyards. "This is Zephyrian Prime," Sorensen explained, "a key staging ground for the Vazir fleet. If we can take it out, we'll cripple their ability to reinforce the front lines." Kane studied the data scrolling across the display. The planet was heavily fortified. The Vazir wouldn't let it go without a fight. "You want the Vipers in?" Kane asked. Sorensen nodded. "Not just the Vipers. We're launching the largest offensive in human history. Every available warship, every special forces unit, every colony militia. We're throwing everything we have at them." Kane exhaled slowly. This was it, the beginning of something far bigger than any single mission. The room fell into quiet anticipation, each soldier, officer, and strategist processing the weight of what they were about to do. Malik finally broke the silence. "If we pull this off, we'll be fighting on their turf." Sorensen nodded. "Exactly." For the first time in the war, humanity wasn't just surviving. They were taking the fight to the enemy. The Admiral took a step forward, his gaze intense. "This is our moment. The Vazir think they're unstoppable, that we're nothing but an inconvenience. They see us as weak." His voice rose, filled with unshakable resolve. "Let's show them just how wrong they are." A surge of energy passed through the room. Officers straightened. Soldiers clenched their fists. The fear that had lingered for so long was being replaced with something else. Determination. The meeting ended. Orders were given. Plans were set in motion. As the officers and soldiers filed out, Kane lingered for a moment, staring at the map of Zephyrian Prime. He could already picture the battle, the flames, the gunfire, the chaos, and the blood. They had won today, but many more would die before this war was over. Malik stepped beside him. "You ready for this?" Kane exhaled. "I don't think it matters if we're ready." He turned, heading for the exit. "We're going anyway." The Revenant's engines roared to life, joining the hundreds of warships preparing for battle. Humanity had been fighting for survival. Now, they were fighting for victory. And the Vazir had no idea what was coming.